Hello, I'm Bailey Leisure, and this is my NHL first round of the Stanley Cup Playoffs recap, as well as my second round predictions, as I'm going to be going over all the first round matchups in this year's Stanley Cup Playoffs, and then giving my predictions for the second round. So, kicking off, starting in the East, the Tampa Bay Lightning and the New Jersey Devils. I expected the Lightning to handily win that series, and they did, 4-1. I didn't expect a sweep. A lot of these series, I didn't. Kind of the surprising ones is where you got the sweeps, but the Lightning were able to take care of the Devils there. Moving on to the series that just ended as I'm recording this tonight, the Boston Bruins and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Really good series. The Bruins, Tuukka Rask kind of struggled in that series, and it's kind of a shame for Anderson for the Maple Leafs. He had a pretty good, really helped the Maple Leafs get it to 7 games. But in the Maple Leafs, they had a couple leads in that game, but just couldn't hold on in that third period. So Boston, it's really concerning because I didn't expect that. Like all these series, I did not expect a sweep. But I thought the Bruins would win in at least 5 games, at most 6. And for them to go 7, it was really interesting. And they won and they're moving on, they're going to be playing the Tampa Bay Lightning. It's going to be a really interesting series there. But Bruins, they showed there were some flaws with that team. And, I think they're probably, because of those flaws, I think they're probably going to go in as the underdogs against the Lightning in that series. Moving on to the Washington-Columbus series, this was another weird series in the Eastern Conference. The Capitals, we've seen them in recent years get to the second round and just can't get out of it. The Capitals, the 4 of these 6 games went into overtime, including the first 3. And the Capitals lost both had home ice advantage, lost their first 2, and then they were able to come back on the road, get those 2, and, we're down 2-0 and won 4 straight. So it was a really interesting series. They had to change goaltenders. I think in Game 4, they went to Braden Holtby. So it was really interesting. It's kind of a shame for Columbus. I mean, this is they had never won a playoff series. They've never even won 3 games in their history. So it was a big shame. It was a shame for them, not to be able to finish off. I mean, they had this series. I thought they were going to sweep or at least win in 5 games after taking the first 2 games on the road, but it wasn't to be. So I think a lot of questions for the Blue Jackets. But the Capitals will be moving on, playing for the 3rd consecutive year. They're going to be playing the Pittsburgh Penguins. And the last series in the Eastern Conference, the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Philadelphia Flyers, the battle of the Pennsylvania hockey teams. Pittsburgh, I expected them to win this. Didn't expect it to go to 6 games. It was a pretty, the stars for the Penguins were able to get it done. Crosby and Malkin and a lot of those guys. The Flyers had a couple of good players as well. They had some goaltending issues in that series. I think they had Elliott. They had to change that. But the Penguins won. Were 1 in 6 games. I kind of expected after the first game, winning set by a touchdown, to probably sweep, but that wasn't the case. Just a disappointment. The Flyers had 3 home games in this series and couldn't win any of them. So it was a bit of a struggle for them. So going forward, the Penguins will be playing the Capitals, like I said before, the 3rd consecutive year. They've won the last 2, and obviously the Penguins have gone on to win the Stanley Cup Finals. They are aiming for a 3-peat, and they continue that in this series. So moving on to the Western Conference. So this was an interesting series because I expected the Avalanche. This was probably the series I thought was going to be a sweep, but the Avalanche were kind of I think they got leads in the first two games, but couldn't win those in Nashville. They were able to do it in Game 3. Game 4, the Predators were able to win. Game 5, kind of late in that third period, they were able to get 2 goals and win that series. And then, Game 6, the Predators just dominated. So it was a pretty interesting series, and I think the Avalanche surprised a lot of people this season, but the Predators were just the heavy favorites, and they just got it done. So on to the Winnipeg-Minnesota series. Just unfortunate luck for the Minnesota Wild. didn't have Ryan Suter. After Game 3, they lost Zach Parise, and the Winnipeg Jets, they just dominated, in the Atlanta Thrashers Winnipeg Jets history. Never won a playoffs game, never won a playoff series. They were able to do both those things as, handily defeated the Winnipeg Jets handily defeated the Minnesota Wild, and they were able to do that. Moving on to the Vegas Golden Knights and the Los Angeles Kings. For the Golden Knights been one of the biggest stories in the NHL this year. Expansion team made it to the playoffs. The first team, I think, in like 50 years to get a sweep in the playoffs. As an expansion team, this was, even if this was a sweep, this was a series that was closer than presented. Because I think each of these games were 1-goal games. Jonathan Quick looked very well, and it was just a battle between two good goaltenders. Marc-Andre Fleury, 3-time Stanley Cup winner. Jonathan Quick, 2-time Stanley Cup champion. And Quick played a really good series, but he just couldn't get the backup. And the Golden Knights were able to make the plays that they needed to make and get the goals. And they rode great goaltending for the rest of the series. Which brings me into the final Western Conference series of the first round, the Anaheim Ducks and the San Jose Sharks. Unlike the previous series I talked about, this was just a domination by the Sharks. They dominated. Evander Kane had a very good game one, and they kind of just rode that for the rest of the series. They just dominated the Ducks. I mean, it was, at least for the LA Kings, they had some great goaltending and something to take away that was well. I feel like the Ducks didn't really have that. It's like they didn't even show up. So it was very disappointing. But the San Jose Sharks, really a big test for them is that this is the first year that they've had to do it without, one of their main staples in Patrick Marleau. But when you got like Logan Couture, you still have Joe Thornton, you got Evander Kane, you still have Joe Pavelski. You have some great pieces there. Still have Martin Jones, that did good enough goaltender. So they just were really able to ride that, and they just dominated the Ducks. So now for my second round predictions, I'm not going to do games, how many there are going to be games until the conference finals and the Stanley Cup final. But in the Eastern Conference, you have for the third consecutive year in the second round, the Capitals and the Pittsburgh Penguins. Hopefully for the Capitals, third time's the charm. For the Penguins, trying to get one step closer to having a chance at a three-peat. This is just something that's been eluding for the Capitals for the last 20 years, and has been eluding Alex Ovechkin probably his entire career, trying to get to the third round, trying to get something in his legacy, have a chance at a Stanley Cup, and it's kind of eluded them. The Penguins, they've had Sidney Crosby, who's kind of like the Tom Brady of the NHL, and I think this is going to be a hard-fought series, but I just think from history-wise and just the Penguins, I think they're just going to be a little bit too much. This Penguins team's not as good as the previous two ones, but I just think from a history standpoint, the Penguins, there's more pressure on the Capitals. There's not really that much pressure to the Penguins. They've been there and done that, kind of. They're trying to do it again. And I think this is going to be a hard-fought series, but I just think the narrative is going to be the same. I think the Penguins will probably... This probably a series, even though I'm not predicting it. It's probably going to go 6 or 7 games. But I just think the Penguins, they're going to, they're the favorites, and I think they're going to probably get to the Eastern Conference Finals and defeat the Capitals in the second round. Moving on to the other matchup in the Eastern Conference, the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Boston Bruins. This has been probably one of the two stories in the Eastern Conference and in the NHL this year. Like I've said, coming out of the East. Tampa Bay was able to handily defeat the New Jersey Devils. Bruins had a little bit of trouble late in that series against the Toronto Maple Leafs. And like I've stated before, I think that trouble is going to expose some holes. I think the goaltending is still... It's kind of issues for both teams, but I think that Vasilevsky just had a better series than Tuukka Rask. And I just think, star power. I mean, look at what, the Bruins have some great pieces, but I just think the Lightning are a better team. You have JT Realmuto, you have Ryan McDonough, you have Steven Stamkos, you have Tyler Johnson. I just think that that's going to be the key. And because the Bruins kind of looked a little bit roughed and kind of got not exposed, but the Maple Leafs showed some holes. I think goaltending just for the Lightning is just a little bit better in this series. So I'm going to take the Tampa Bay Lightning. Moving on to the Western Conference, the Nashville Predators versus the Winnipeg Jets. The kind of, to a lesser extent, the Predators. I expected them to probably sweep the Avalanche, but that was not the case. The Jets, I expected them to dominate, kind of a very injury plagued Wild. I think this is going to be a hard fought series. But I think that the Predators, they've just been a better team, and I think that star power. I think this is going to be a great matchup, another series that could probably go 7 games. But I'm going to take the Nashville Predators in this series. And moving on to my final series in the conference semifinals, in the Western Conference, the Vegas Golden Knights against the San Jose Sharks. This is going to be another hard-fought series, and to be honest, I could see any of these series going 7 games, but the Vegas Golden Knights against the San Jose Sharks, both teams who swept their opponents in the first round. I think this is going to be a really tight series. I'm going to give the slight edge to the Golden Knights in this scenario, but I could see this going either way. This is kind of like my Washington-Columbus series in the first round. I just think that the Golden Knights, just a little bit, I just like them a little bit more than the Sharks, but this could go either way. So I picked the Vegas Golden Knights in this series. That's it for my first round Stanley Cup Playoff recap and my second round predictions video. Thanks everybody for watching. With the NFL draft coming up this weekend, I'm going to do a NFL draft recap and my thoughts and my grades for the draft. Who came out the best team, who was kind of a disappointment when it comes to drafts. That's one of the big. This is a busy week for football this week. With almost the end of the first month of the regular season of Major League Baseball, I'm going to do a recap of April. I'm going to do monthly recaps this season instead of doing one kind of weekly like I did last year, as I'm going to cover every Major League Baseball team. As far as NBA playoffs, I was going to do a first round prediction. I didn't realize, I lost track of when the NBA playoffs started, so I'm going to do I'm going to wait till the conference finals. I'm going to do predictions for that, as well as do predictions for the NBA finals as well. So, check that out. So, thanks everybody for watching. I did a recent another GNR Central podcast, so check that out in the description below. Subscribe if you like the content on my channel. Click like and comment on your thoughts. What have you thought of the 2018 Stanley Cup Playoffs? What do you think about my predictions? So leave the comments in the comments section below. Thanks everybody for watching, and I will see you all later.